Hi, everybody. Before I start this presentation and my face gets zoomed into a tiny circle on your screen, I wanted to pop up here in real life and say hello. Thank you for being here. And I want to give you this message, especially if you are an athlete or you are the person that's actively going through rehab. I love my dietitians and my sports med providers that are watching this as well, but this one specifically goes out to the athletes. The data and the research that we have on this is not perfect. Okay, so I do not expect you to take this as black and white and this perfect solution to what you have. I am using common sense and best practices, and I want you to do that with your body as well. Okay, don't get too caught up in all these tiny details. Just do your best and take the next step forward. That's what all this is about. Okay, my head is zooming down now. All right, welcome. We are here to talk about the essentials, what you need to know nutrition-wise for your rehab. And I am about to throw a lot at you. So get ready to screenshot, get ready to kind of take your notes, have your notebook ready, because this is virtual. So I don't really know who I'm talking to. I don't know what your injury is. I don't know what stage of injury recovery you're in. I don't know if you're a dietitian and you already know 95% of this and you're waiting for me to throw some golden snippets at you. So I'm going to try to talk to all of you. Take what resonates, leave the rest. The very first thing that we need to make this personal is to know where you specifically are starting. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds here and actually take a couple seconds here, pause this recording and fill this out. What does your normal daily timeline look like? What does breakfast look like? Lunch, dinner? What does caffeine intake look like? Water intake? Any other drinks? What about snacks? Are you having specific snacks at specific times, or are you kind of like grabbing handfuls of things throughout the day? What does a typical day of food look like for you? Okay, and then hopefully by the end of this presentation, we can answer these questions. How much food do you need, roughly? What kinds of foods do you need? We're going to touch a little bit on what supplements might be helpful, and then we're going to continue to make this personal. And the way that we continue to make this personal is you get to define what you care about the most. So yes, I'm going to tell you what research tells us and what I think you should focus on. But like I have said before, I'm about to throw a lot at you, and I'm not expecting that you take all of it in and suddenly do all of it perfectly. So this that you're about to see is how we start to pick our priorities. And we're going to come back to this later. But again, I want you to pause your screen right here and take a couple minutes, read through this, write down 2 or 3 statements that feel most important to you. Not the ones that you think should be most important to you, but the ones that are actually most important to you. And we're going to come back to this later. The next part of how we continue to make this individual to you is we're going to figure out what makes this hard for you. Nutrition, if we all could just perfectly do what we know we should do, nobody would worry about this. But that's pretty freaking hard. So we're going to talk through some of the most common challenges that I see and how we can make easy ways to get around this. So again, pause your screen, read through this list, and I want you to pick 2 or 3 that sound most like something you would say. Next, I want you to define your stage of injury and what should be or kind of is most important to worry about right now. And there are 4 stages of injury. We're kind of going to skip over this first one. When the injury happens, we're either kind of waiting for surgery or deciding if surgery is an option or kind of figuring out what next steps are. I already have a free surgery guide. So if this is you right now, I'm going to point you in that direction and we're going to skip it for the rest of you. The next one is when we are in a brace or we're in a cast or we are not really cleared to do anything. It's kind of our couch potato stage when we're immobilized. What we are most worried about is maintaining our muscle. You're going to hear me say this a lot, but your muscle, especially during this time is getting massive signals to break down, to waste away. And we want to do our best to provide signals to keep it, to maintain it, to potentially build it and save it. Okay. And we can do that through food. We can do it through other things too, but I'm going to talk about food. We also want to manage our inflammation. Inflammation is an important part of this process, so we need some, but we don't want it to be overwhelming. And there's some great food options that can be really helpful during this time. We want to take care of our symptoms, and then, we need to provide the building blocks for whatever it is we're trying to repair. So I'm going to talk about some specific types of injuries and what those specific nutrients are that we need. We cannot build a house if we do not have any bricks or wood or material. So think of it this way. This is how we are building our new house. Next step is continuing to rebuild. So now we're clear to kind of work on that limb. We are going to continue to make it stronger and improve the integrity of that house. So we are going to continue to provide those building blocks. We are also working on getting our strength and our muscle back at this time. So we're going to talk about a lot of muscle building strategies. And then we're going to talk a little bit about workload and calories in, calories out. And we're just going to talk about some strategies for this time so that we can be really meticulous. We don't just want to throw spaghetti at the wall and hope something sticks and something is working. We want to create some patterns that can be helpful for us. And then our last stage is return to play. We'd be here all day, and I don't want that. You don't want that. So we're mostly going to focus on 2 and 3 today. The immobilization phase, kind of the biggest thing here is holding on to that muscle. Again, like I said, it's getting massive, massive signals to break down. And one of, if not the most important things nutritionally to combat that is to eat enough food. And definitely by far the most common question that I get is, how many calories do I need? So in order to talk about maintaining muscle, I want to address the calorie question first. This is a big area of confusion, and it doesn't need to be. Okay, so we're going to look at calories out. That's, think of this whole column here as the sum of that, of before your injury. And then obviously I'm going to show you after your injury. So there's 3 ways that your body kind of burns calories or uses energy. The biggest component is something called RMR. That's your resting metabolic rate. And if you were to do nothing all day, but lie in bed and watch Netflix and not even move, just be awake, this is how many calories your body would need. For some of you, it's like 70% of your total calories. It's a much bigger number than we think. And it's all of our basic human functions. It's how your heart keeps beating. It's how your brain continues to make new synapses and learn and function. It's your immune system. It's that muscle breakdown and rebuild and all that, those tissues constantly doing that. It's your hormones. It's daily optimal function. And it is a huge piece of the puzzle that many of us forget about. Another much smaller piece of the puzzle is something called thermic effective food. It's basically like, it costs money to make money. You gotta spend a little energy to get energy from the food that you're digesting. And then this last piece is activity, which obviously is going to go down in the after part. But I think most of us really overestimate how much this is contributing to your total caloric intake and how much it's going to go down. For most of you, yeah, it'll go down, but it's not going to go away. Okay, so what happens after is our RMR actually increases. Our TEF stays the same. And like I said, our activity goes down. But, if you're on crutches right now, that's a really inefficient movement. It's a new movement pattern for your body. So it's going to take more calories and energy to be able to do that. You're like a baby lamb or a baby giraffe on stilts right now. Even just, fidgeting or moving about your daily life, we still have an activity factor. But the most important thing is we basically have a new factor, and that's your healing factor. And very purposefully in this slide, the size of the left column and the size of the right or the after column are roughly the same size. For most of you, the amount of calories you need are roughly the same, especially if you had a surgery. They are roughly the same. And since we are no longer exercising, going to practice, whatever, if you were fueling for that practice, during that practice, and getting proper post fuel, and now naturally that is taken out because we're not going to practice anymore, or if we're going, we're sitting on the side and feeling sorry for ourselves, which is fair. This buffs out. So I really don't want you to worry about the calorie piece as much as most of you guys do. 9 times out of 10, the athletes that are working with me and the adults that are working with me are not eating enough food to support their rehab. If you would like a number, there's a lot of different ways that we can calculate this. Well, and that's supposed to say 35 calories per kilogram, not grams. This is a pretty easy calculation. And when I do all of my other methods, this one's pretty close to accurate. So this is the one that I'm going to give you. It's the easiest one if you want a number. And again, I don't want you to perfectly abide by this. It's not there to be some obsessive tool. It's there because most of you aren't eating enough. And that is a good calculation to check and go, oh, yeah, I probably should be eating enough. Okay. And again, especially if you are following a surgery, this is that number. The next important piece of maintaining your muscle and sending that signal that we want to build it is to eat enough protein. Okay. This is something that 99% of us have heard. We are shooting for our body weight in protein. So 2.2 grams per kilogram is 1 gram of protein per pound. But I want to make the important point here that I don't want protein to take over your life. For some people, eating their body weight in protein, super easy, no problem. They're actually eating more than that, and I need them to pull back. For other people, this feels impossible. And that's okay. As long as we are, I would say at minimum at 1.2, 1.3 grams per kilogram, maybe 1.5, you're doing fantastic. Let's try to get there. Don't feel like we have to get to this 1 gram per pound. This is also an important place to say that, yes, we need a lot of protein, but protein farts are a thing. Protein constipation is a thing. When protein is too much of a percentage of our total intake, that can be an issue. So I would say maximum, if we're talking macro breakdown, I don't really go over 35% on protein. In reality, I don't really go over 30% on protein intake. If you're getting to the point where your protein goal is 40% or 50% of your total intake, then you're either A, not eating enough calories, or B, your protein goal is way too high, and that might be causing some issues for you. So we need to bring that down. The next piece of the protein puzzle of sending that signal to maintain your muscle, protein is made up of amino acids. There's one in particular called leucine that is basically the key to turning on that signal. So your leucine intake is very important. Ideally, every time we're getting protein in, we're getting 3 to 5 grams of leucine. Typically, that's 20 to 30 grams of animal protein. And you'll see more of those resources here, or more of those examples here in your workbook that goes with this presentation. But I will say here, if you are more of a plant-based person, this becomes a little bit trickier. We hear a lot about how plant protein is not as good at signaling that muscle growth switch as animal, and that's true, except when leucine is matched. So if you're choosing an ant or a plant-based protein powder, we want to make sure that it has leucine content in it. The other thing that you could do is add BCAAs, so branched chain amino acids. Leucine is one of those. Or again, in this workbook, I've included your plant-based sources of leucine. Okay, next, again, related to protein and signaling to muscle. Research tells us that getting at least 20 grams of protein, roughly, every 4 hours is the best at maximizing that signal to your muscle. So this paper in particular looked at 40 grams, I think, every 6 hours and 10 grams every 2 hours, and found that it was kind of like Goldilocks. This 20 grams every 4 hours was most effective at turning that key. What does this mean? I need you to eat breakfast with protein in it. I need you to have a lunch with protein in it. We need to have steady meals throughout our day that has a protein source. I will also say here, if you're a bigger athlete and you have a very high protein goal, yeah, 20 grams at breakfast is not going to be enough for you. The most important thing here is that every 4 hours, and for athletes that have a really high calorie goal, it's probably every 3 hours. So the other kind of important takeaway here is intermittent fasting during rehab, potentially not our best option. And then last but not least, if we are talking about maintaining muscle and sending that signal, some studies show us that 5 grams of creatine does a pretty good job of that and can be helpful specifically in that, rehab immobilization post-op phase. However, not every study shows a benefit. So if you're currently taking creatine, I'm going to suggest that you continue taking creatine. But if you're not currently taking it, take that into account. It's not going to hurt. It might help. It's also expensive. Well, of the supplements you could take, creatine is not the craziest, but it costs money. It's, it's something else that you need to add to your day. And if there's a bunch of other kind of food-based things that we should focus on first, the choice is yours, but maybe we'll focus on the food first. Next, when we are in that immobilization phase, we've got a lot of swelling going on. Specifically, if you are in that phase right now, I'm sure you can look at that limb and it doesn't look normal. It's probably big and it feels bloated. What we can do through food is try to get at least 3 to 5 antioxidants or anti-inflammatories in per day. So antioxidants are the things that you get in fruits and veggies. I specifically listed pineapple, berries, and dark leafy greens because there's some specific qualities in those that can be helpful, but any fruits or veggies work. Doesn't matter if they're frozen, doesn't matter if they're canned, doesn't matter if they're fresh, whatever fruits and veggies you can count in that 3 to 5. And then your anti-inflammatories, we're talking about anti-inflammatory fats, your omega-3s, olive oil, walnuts, chia seeds. And again, I specifically listed tuna and salmon because those have some specific omega-3 types of fats that we really like. There's also a few supplements that kind of fall into this category. So there's an omega-3. I'm not expecting you to eat tuna and salmon every day. I actually don't want you to eat tuna specifically every day. I don't really want you to eat tuna more than 4 times per week, because then we need to have a mercury conversation. The asterisk here is some surgeons have strong opinions about a fish oil supplementation close to pre or post surgery. So just double check with them because that's not my area. I'm not going to step on those toes. But like 9 out of 10 of them are cool with it. Curcumin or turmeric is another great antioxidant. And then tart cherry juice is a pretty common one. We're also seeing blackcurrant and pomegranate kind of come up in the research. same idea. It's a very powerful antioxidant. It's kind of concentrated in an easy to drink form. Anecdotally, I've had a lot of athletes tell me that it helps with their soreness. Anecdotally, I've also had a lot of athletes tell me they have some fun, funky dreams because typically you want to take this before bed. It's a natural form of melatonin. The only asterisk I will say for tart cherry as an option is there is such thing as too much of a good thing. Too much tart cherry can potentially blunt the healing response. Like, it's not letting us get enough inflammation. I would say this is not an everyday thing. This is a tool in our toolkit for when our body is telling us something. So if we have a particularly high level of swelling, or we are trying something new with physical therapy, and we're going to use this as a tool so that the next day we can function. We are going to use this. I don't want to use the word sparingly because I don't want to scare you away from it, but we don't need to guzzle it every day. Okay, next, the bricks we need to build our house. I wish that I had put this in shining, flashing neon letters on this slide, but I didn't. So I'm going to flash my hands at you like this in the hopes that you're going to listen to me say this. The vitamins and minerals that you're going to see on this slide and the next few ones, the goal is to get enough. The goal is not to automatically go supplement with these things, because there's also too much of a good thing for these as well. Vitamin C in super high doses can actually be pro-oxidative instead of anti-oxidative. Zinc in too high of doses affects the absorption of other minerals that we also need, like copper. Magnesium, depending on the type, in too high of doses can lead to diarrhea and stuff like that. So we just want to make sure we're getting enough. You want to make sure that you're getting it in your diet every week. But please don't just see this slide and go buy a supplement of all of these things. Please. Let's make this easier. Vitamin C, include fruit most days. Zinc, if you are eating, eggs and dairy and animal proteins, you're probably getting enough zinc. Magnesium, most of us are not getting enough magnesium, so we can add it in things like pumpkin seeds, trail mix, beans, chia, oatmeal, again, fortified cereals sometimes. And collagen. Collagen is another supplement where there's some research that tells us it's doing really wonderful things, and some research is telling us it's doing nothing. So if you choose to spend your money on collagen, it might be doing nothing. It might be helping. It's not hurting. And if you're not timing it and dosing it correctly, it's not doing anything. So if you're choosing to supplement with collagen, which many of my tendon and ligament athletes, I recommend that they do, we need to have at least 15 grams, and you want to have it 30 to 60 minutes before your workout or your rehab. And here's why. Your tendons and your ligaments are really freaking hard to heal because they don't get good blood flow. And the time that we have peak blood flow is when you're at PT or when you're working out, when we're, actively working through that tendon and ligament. So if we put those nutrients in place so that they are ready to be delivered when that blood flow is highest, that's our best bet that this collagen is going to work for us. But we need the right amount. So if you're taking a collagen gummy, I guarantee you it's not the right amount, and we need to do it at the right time. A really good example of what it looks like to incorporate this is something like a breakfast burrito. Breakfast burritos, by the way, are super easy to make a big batch of and freeze. All right, let's move on to bone. And bone is such a big topic to try to cover here because bone is super highly influenced by what you eat. But I'm going to try my best. Okay. Again, big flashing neon letters here. Do not look at these nutrients on the left and automatically go supplement with them. The goal is that we are getting enough. There is such thing as too much of a good thing, right? We need calcium. We're going to aim for 3 sources per day. We need magnesium. We're going to add it in these things. Vitamin K and vitamin D are also important. Most of us don't have enough vitamin D, and it's hard to get more in your diet. So you probably need to supplement, but I am talking to you in a pre-recorded lecture and I don't know you, so I want to see your blood work before I officially recommend that to you and what that dose would look like. So bring vitamin D up with your doctor. Okay, another example of kind of how to incorporate this. Again, I'm going with breakfast ideas because this seems to be the easiest one to kind of have something similar every day, would be some oatmeal made with milk or an adequate alternative. And what I mean by that is we want a milk alternative that is giving us the nutrients that milk would provide. So I need it to have at least 7 grams of protein, and I need it to have at least 300 milligrams of calcium. Soy milk, yeah, usually great. Almond milk, not so much. So just check your label. The next one that I get a lot of questions about is muscle. Specifically with muscle, it's kind of frustrating because it doesn't play as big of a role as we want it to play. So what I'll say here is hit your protein goals, literally the building blocks of muscle, hit your protein goals, and hydrate. If you think about beef jerky versus a raw steak, this is an anecdote that's used all the time. So if you've heard it 100 times, here's 101. Beef jerky is dry. If you bend it, it snaps in half. Raw meat is hydrated muscle. If you bend it, it is resilient. You can twist it, you can pull it, you can do a lot more to that muscle and it stays in one piece. So hydration is important. And because I don't have, more bullet points for this slide, I'll give you a fun hydration trick that I know. Typically, we are shooting for at least half your body weight in ounces of water. So if you are 200 pounds, we're going to shoot for about 100 ounces daily minimum. So let's pretend that this is a 25 for the math, 25 ounce hydro flask. It's probably 24, but whatever. So I know that I need 4 of these. I'm going to take 4 rubber bands. I'm going to put them on the top of my bottle. And as I finish and refill throughout the day, I'll slide it down just so I know where I am. The other thing that I want to make a really quick note on is scar tissue. I won't pretend to know anything about the topical stuff, but in the hospital, when we are worried about wound healing and just helping that kind of close nicely, Juven is a supplement that works. It's something that I've given to athletes in the past, and it's an option if you want to look into it. All right, let's move on to the rebuild stage. A lot of what we just talked about still applies. So all of those building blocks, whatever injury you have, we still need to apply those. Every tissue in your body is constantly building down or breaking up. Every tissue in your body is constantly breaking down or building up. So we need to have the bricks to build our house, always. And a really cool fact is that your tendon, so I'm looking at you, or your ligament, I'm looking at you, ACL, Achilles, Tommy John, MCL, all of you like long-term rehabbers, which is probably 90% of you that are watching. This remodeling process and improving the strength and the structure of your tendon or ligament can last up to 2 years after your surgery. So we need to continue to provide those building blocks always. Now we're rebuilding strength. So again, everything that I already talked about regarding maintaining muscle is also what we need to rebuild strength. But now we have this super magical, important key, which is called the weight room. That stimulus is incredibly important. Food is great, but food never works in a silo. Nutrition is here to support what you're doing in the weight room. Nutrition is here to support what you're doing in PT. Nutrition is here to support what you're doing on the field. Nutrition alone can't solve anything. It just enhances everything else that you're already working on. So these strategies only work when you put in the work. And my strength coaches and my PTs love when I make sure to emphasize that. So this one's for you guys. Some common mistakes that I see if we are kind of stuck building strength. Typically, we're focusing too much on protein and our carb intake is too low. And sometimes this means we're getting way too much protein powder. So again, if we keep going back to this analogy that you're building a house and you need materials to build your house, and protein is those materials, absolutely right. Carbs are your construction workers. And if the construction company is on strike and we have no workers, we're not building any dang houses. So we need the carbs. That is the energy for the work that your body is trying to put in. The way too much protein powder can also lead to some upset stomachs. I had one athlete one time that was taking 8 scoops of a weight gainer protein powder every day, and his stomach was constantly in gurgles and not feeling good. That's a lot of powder on your body. Another big thing is we're not respecting progressive overload or rest. So this squiggly line right here, let's say at the top of this peak is our workout, and our muscle is going to break down, and then it's going to build up and it's going to get stronger. And then we're going to work out and it's going to break down, it's going to build up and get stronger. We get worse before we get better. But if we have enough stimulus here, we will get better, and this will move in the right direction. If we don't have enough stimulus here, we won't really have this phase. So then we also won't have the climbing phase, and we will become stagnant because we need to up our workload. So increase our weights or increase our volume or increase the intensity. And then, the other piece of this is we need to give it time for this to claw its way back up. So if we are not respecting what our body needs, if we are not respecting rest periods, then you're not going to get stronger. And then this is also my plug. If you're not sleeping, this isn't going to go as well as you want it to go. This is your friendly reminder to prioritize rest and prioritize sleep. The next piece of the rebuild puzzle that can be helpful to think about are these performance plates. There are 3 things that every single one of your plates or your meals should contain. And that is carbs, that is protein, and that is color. And I personally do not care if your color is fruit or vegetable. Whatever you can get in, great. Most of the time, and again, especially, I'm not going to go back to the slide, but in that immobilization phase, I'm using this middle plate because that's what most of us need. The portions, which I know is, so we'll do our big flashing light here to pay attention to listen to this part. The portions of what this plate should look like for most of you is a hand-sized portion of protein. So that's including my fingers. That's my fillet of chicken, 2 fist sizes of carbs, and a fist or 2 of your color. Now, I'm not really going to limit the color. If you want to do more, especially if it's veggies, if you want to do more, go for it. Just don't get so much veg in that we're not able to include the other pieces. When you get to the point that your workouts are more than an hour, or they are very intense, or you're starving at night, or you just notice your energy levels are kind of going down, we need to include these plates on those harder training days. So now we have half our plate with carbs. So we're looking at 3 or 4 fists of that carbohydrate, protein, and veg. Or if you get to a point in rehab where you would like to work on body composition and we're trying to lose some body fat, then our rest day plates are going to transition where half of our plate is fruit or veg, and we're going to come down to 1 fist of carb. I like to think about performance plates as puzzle pieces that we can play around with and use very strategically. And we're going to come back and talk a lot more about this because our next step is to build a plan. So I just shared all of my priorities. I threw all sorts of ideas and options at you, right? We need to get enough calories. We need to get enough protein. We need to space and time our meals correctly. We need to build performance plates at every meal. I talked about all sorts of micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals that are important. This is the order of importance. So if we are not eating enough, your goals today are going to be based on what is easiest for you to eat more. If we're not getting adequate protein, then our goals are what helps us get more protein. We're not going to worry about supplements before we're eating enough calories. You also looked at something and said what your priorities were. So if we go back to that original slide, remember you circled a couple statements. This is really helpful when all those pesky voices in our head start getting loud, meaning, we're second guessing our choices. We are wondering, what's the quote unquote right thing to order on this menu? Or should I go back for seconds? Relying on these values and what's most important to you can be really helpful when that voice gets loud. What I will also say here is, yes, every single thing on this, you can talk one-on-one with a dietitian, but especially these highlighted ones, I would highly encourage you to talk one-on-one with a dietitian and get a little bit more support on these. So let's talk about a few of these, and then we're going to go back a few slides to those performance plates and what I mean by a puzzle. So let's say you circled, it's really important to me to include foods that taste great. And let's say you're like, number one favorite food in the world is mac and cheese. And you might have this impression that mac and cheese is not a rehab supporting food, but so I'm going to fight that notion, but let's talk about how to include it in this puzzle. If mac and cheese is something that you love and you crave and you want to include, and every now and then you find yourself just having, a box of Kraft mac and cheese for dinner. Instead, what we can do is we can know that that mac and cheese is our carb portion of this meal, and we need to add what's missing. We can either mix it in, so if it doesn't take away from the flavor enjoyment of that mac and cheese, to add, I don't know, peas or broccoli and chicken or shrimp, then we have this bowl of pasta for dinner that includes everything we need. If it potentially does take away from the enjoyment, then we have it on the side. And if you're looking in the mirror and you're like, no, it genuinely, like, I just want a bowl of mac and cheese, that's totally fine. One, I never expect you to be 100% perfect all the time. We're shooting for 80%. We can have that bowl of mac and cheese and know that things are missing and just say, this is part of my 20%. There's nothing wrong with that. Or we can have that bowl of mac and cheese and say, okay, I'm missing 2 pieces of my puzzle. Potentially at a different meal that day, I'm going to include those pieces of my puzzle, or at a different snack, or the following day, I'm going to make sure I really prioritize those things that I was maybe a little short on the day before. If your priority is quick and easy options, and there's a lot of quick and easy ways that we can build these performance plates. I could go to any fast food restaurant and build a performance plate. I could go to the grocery store and pick up some minute rice and some frozen veggies and some rotisserie chicken, and I have a fantastic performance plate. If your value on here is foods that help you build muscle, or maybe foods that make you a better athlete, and we're building out performance plates, maybe our goal is 90% of the time we're doing a really good job of at least including this protein in with our performance plate, or building out a full-on performance plate instead of 80%. The goal is never 100%. So take that away right now. But potentially, like, that's the promise we're going to make to ourselves, and we're going to hold ourselves to that standard because that is the value that we chose. Same thing with if eating foods that help your injury heal was one of your top priorities, you're going to go back to maybe the notes that you wrote about what micro nutrients can help with that. And maybe your performance plate has a 4th component where we're making sure that we're hitting one of those with every meal, 80% of the time. So however you want to apply this is up to you, but I have found really getting clear on that, why, and then using these puzzle pieces to build things out can be really helpful. The next part of our individualization is learning what makes this hard for you sometimes. So again, you can see a dietitian for all of these, but I will encourage you, especially if you circled some of these highlighted ones, you should seek out a dietitian one-on-one. Remember what you circled. Potentially you want to screenshot this because I'm going to go to the next slide and it's going to have some solutions in the same bullet point spot. And then I'm going to go through 4 of my most common kind of speed bumps that I see and some solutions that can be helpful. For a lot of these, especially more of those like food feeling type stuff that can come up, we're going to utilize the puzzle. So let's talk about cravings. One, I need you to tell yourself that all foods are allowed at any time. Then our little monkey brains can kind of let go of some stuff sometimes. And I'm going to tell you a story about that. But two, we can continue to use the puzzle strategy. Let's say you're like me and you love chocolate, and I use this example a lot. I guess it depends on how much you're having, but I'm going to count that in the carb category. A breakfast that I have quite often is some Greek yogurt and some berries and some chocolate chips. I'm including my craving while also hitting a pretty dang good performance plate. Sometimes I just want the chocolate. Today is literally Halloween, the day that I'm recording this. And tomorrow I'm absolutely going to be hitting up those candy sales. Personally, I think the best Halloween candy is 100 grams. And sometimes I just want to eat 100 grand. I don't want to include it in a performance plate. And that's totally fine. The important thing here, which we're going to talk about in a second, is that I am connecting the enjoyment I'm going to get with that 100 grand to when I'm actually eating it. Okay, so let's talk about mindfulness. And this one you'll see show up. So back on here. So mindfulness, making sure we're allowing all foods. This is things like I'm getting cravings. I feel like I can't stop eating. I'm stress eating, things like that show up a lot in rehab. So I'm going to give you an example of my 100 grand, and then I'm going to talk about an example with an athlete. I want to make sure when I'm having that chocolate, I'm registering that I'm enjoying that chocolate. So I need to physically stop. Sometimes I'll close my eyes and I will take a bite of that chocolate and think damn, this is really good. Other times we've all done this where, I grab my leftover Halloween candy, my 100 grand on the way out the door. And by the time I've gotten to my car, it's already gone. And I'm like, shoot, now I want another one because I didn't let my brain recognize that I just ate a delicious food. We need to let that register. And that's part of what this mindfulness is. Part of registering that you are eating food and it's time to enjoy food is actually putting food on a plate and kind of setting a vibe. We're having a snack now. I'm going to enjoy this snack. We're having lunch now. I'm going to enjoy this lunch. Okay. I'm guilty of it too. We eat lunch at our desks or we eat lunch in the car or whatever. But just registering and letting our brain know we are getting the satisfaction of food can be really helpful. Also, registering how hungry or how full we feel can be really helpful. It's not perfect, but it can be helpful. Next, if you find this doing a lot, start to question and dig a little bit deeper about what feeling this food is doing for you. Is it boredom? Is it stress? Is it loneliness? Is it anger? Is it comfort? What other tools can we put in our toolbox for those specific emotions, right? Do we need to learn some other stress management tools? That doesn't mean that we're taking food out of our toolbox. It just means we're going to add other things as well. And last but not least, I want you to notice how you talk about food and body in your mind about yourself and to others. If people are walking by and you're constantly like, wow, that pair of pants looks awful on them, or, wow, they're eating a lot, or they're not eating that much, or whatever, you're making all of these internal assumptions or judgments. It's pretty natural that you might feel self-conscious that others are making those assumptions and judgments about you, and they're probably not. So start to notice what that is and where that's coming from and dig a little bit deeper there and how you're relating that to yourself. Are you also making assumptions about yourself of a really common one of oh, this is really bad, I shouldn't do this? And it's why? We just talked about, this magical puzzle and how you can incorporate everything. So nothing is bad and no food is making you a bad person. So let's take away that black and white language. All right, moving on to maybe some more tangible stuff and not so on the food feelings side of things. Anytime we're talking about learning or trying new nutrition habits, this book, Atomic Habits, comes up because it's one of the best resources I've ever read. It's fantastic. And I believed this before I read this book, but this book really solidified it for me. Don't really think willpower or discipline is a very big factor in our food choices. And I think a lot of people are really unkind to themselves because they feel they should be more disciplined, when in reality, we can do a lot of tweaks and hacks and setting our environment that make the choices we want to make much easier. We don't have to white knuckle grip our nutrition choices all the time. That's not sustainable. So a key message in this book is make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. Let's say your goal after this is to eat more fruit. One, we need to buy fruit and have it in our fridge, and don't tuck it away in the drawer, have it ready. Like, I don't know about you, but when I have grapes in my fridge, if they're not in a container and they're just open, every time I open my fridge, I'm grabbing a couple grapes, right? I'm eating more fruit because it's obvious and it's right there. Make it attractive. If you really like grapes, don't buy cantaloupe. Or if you really hate cantaloupe, don't buy cantaloupe, right? Choose a food option that you really like that's going to taste good. Make it easy. Maybe at the beginning of the week, we're portioning some out, or you're buying some of those pre-portioned or pre-cut fruits. Make it satisfying. Maybe you really love nuts and chocolate chips or whatever, and we're going to have dried fruit in a trail mix, and that's a snack that we're going to try. Next, a really important hack is to attach it to something you already like. So if our goal is to eat more fruit, maybe typically you come home at night and there's a show that you really love, and the best part of the day is kicking off your shoes, for the women here, taking off your bra, sinking into that couch and watching that show and relaxing. Maybe we also get to have our bowl of fruit when we sink into our couch. So that fruit also becomes something that we're looking forward to. It's part of that routine now. And last but not least, form an identity around it. Instead of saying, I'm trying to eat more fruit, say, I'm a person that eats a lot of fruit. It sounds simple, but we've got monkey brains and it matters. And then the last kind of habit tip I will give for you here as you move forward with this stuff is, so many of us operate when it comes to our food in black and white. We're this pendulum over here on the left. We're either all the way in or we're none of the way in, right? If we go back to our performance plates, I'm sure many of you saw this and you're like, I'm going to do this for every single plate, or I'm going to completely forget about it and I'll start again on Monday. That doesn't really get us anywhere. We need to have a little bit of grace for ourselves. So we're going to take away the pendulum, and instead we're going to operate on a dial. This dial is our dials of effort, and we can change this every single day. So again, let's say our goal is to incorporate more performance plates. If, 0 is we're putting no effort in at all, and, not making any change. And 10 is every single plate is going to be a performance plate. I never want to operate at 0 or at 10. And I know athletes that have put an actual dial on the mirror on their bathroom wall and kind of woken up in the morning, and while they're brushing their teeth, they're kind of thinking about where they want to put their dial, and they write out what each number means. And so we're talking about performance plates. Maybe let's say it's finals week and you're super stressed and there's a lot to worry about, and we can maybe put a 2 in. A 2 maybe on your performance dial means that we're going to eat 3 meals a day, because when you're in the library all day and you're very stressed, we tend to kind of forget about meals. Doesn't matter what those meals look like, we're just going to eat them. And then maybe the following week, we don't have class, and you're feeling like excited or whatever, and we're going to take it up to a 7. And a 7 might be that 5 days of the week, you're going to hit your performance plates, and maybe you're going to try to cook a new recipe and learn something new. I don't know. You can define what you want these to be. But you're still giving yourself 2 days of grace because life happens. And we are not operating at a 10 ever. And what happens is then at the end of the day, you can say, oh, I hit my 2 today. Nice. That was my goal. Oh, I hit my 7 today. Nice. That was my goal. Instead of constantly having this pressure on yourself that I need to be hitting these performance plates all the time and feeling like we are failing or not doing enough and coming at it from a very negative approach, we then get to say, perfect, I did it. Even though it's way less, you're doing it, right? And a 2 is better than a 0. At the end of the day, If we bring back those big flashing neon signs, perfection is not the goal. A lot of you are in a very long rehab process right now, and you will hear it from your physical therapist, you will hear it from your coaches, you will hear it from your doctors, and you're going to hear it from me. Consistency is so much more important than anything else. And perfection and consistency are not friends. So this is true with your nutrition as well. Perfection is not the goal. All right. There's a lot of other resources in the workbook that you should have gotten in your email to be able to download with this. So make sure you're taking a look through those. There's more examples of certain foods and things that you can do. But as always, if there was something that was confusing or that you feel wasn't covered, I'm always happy to talk. You can find me on my website. You can find me on my email. You can find me on Instagram. Good luck. Go kick ass. Don't be perfect.